English translation. 314th contact. Thursday, 8th of November, 2001, 0116 hours.
Surprise. Good to see you, dear friend. Welcome to my lair. Ava just went over there with Selena.
I have noticed that. Greetings, dear friend. My coming is based on the fact that I bring you new questions of our spiritual leadership, which you are kindly requested to elaborate for us in relevant answers.
Of course, that is not a question, my friend. I am always happy to do such work for you. Incidentally, I have done the last of the work, so you can take it with you.
Thank you for that.
You are welcome. It is always a pleasure, as I said before.
Every effort is worth the thanks.
Of course, that is right. But your thanks still makes me somewhat uncomfortable because you are not to humble yourself to my dignity, but rather me to yours.
I give you the thanks of all of us, not only mine. Besides, the greater part of the dignity is on your side. I also agree on this in the sense of our spiritual leadership. And this dignity refers not only to your spirit form, but also to your personality and to all the characteristics of your character, your form of thinking and feeling, and the virtues. This along with your love, your knowledge, and your wisdom.
Now please make a point. Slowly my comb is swelling, and I am sure my face is already red. But your praise also makes me insecure and makes me worry that I will be attacked again and called megalomaniacal.
My words are not praise, you should know that, but they are a clear, reasonable, and justified statement.
But I am still embarrassed, so I want us to leave the palaver to this form.
As you wish, but it is the truth. Well then, I have something else that will surely please you. In a still unopened attic of my father Sfath's estate, I have found further material which he has recorded for himself concerning your dictations, articles, and other written works. One of your works I will transmit to you when you write down our conversation. The little work is entitled Basic Rules of the Human Beings. Perhaps if you rework this one, of which there are 49, into a brochure and choose a different title, you could create something for your community from it. An appropriate title would be, for example, Basic Rules of the Figu.
Aha, the title Basic Rules of the Human Being seems familiar. If I remember correctly, they are guidelines that I wrote down once, about 2 or 3 years before Sfath left for good.
The date of your writing is recorded as Saturday, the 3rd of February, 1951, when you just turned 14 years old and stayed for a day with your aunt, Martha Flückiger, in Regensdorf.
Oh yes, now I remember. The whole thing came about through a conversation with my cousin Walter Flückiger. It is nice that this recording could still be found.
This corresponds to the situation at that time, as my father's notes show. So far, I have only looked through a few data of the memory, but I have found that there are other records concerning your written works. Of course, I will gradually withdraw all of them and transmit them to you in the course of time.
What do you mean?
In our ongoing conversations, I will always weave in some of it.
I see. You mean you bring something here and there or transmit something when writing the contact conversations?
That is the meaning of my words.
Good. What about Thursday? Who's going to do computer proofreading with Bernadette and me?
This time it will be me again.
Good. The whole thing is going great. We finished the first volume of the contact conversations. Next year we want to put it in print. In addition, on Monday I commissioned the book by Hans-Georg Lanzendorfer for printing. He calls it Secrets of a Parish Priest or something.
This is good news, but Bernadette and you should be very careful that the Zeugenbuch is the next work to be published this year.
It is a work in progress.
I am pleased about that.
Can I ask you one more thing about the euro, which is supposed to be a single currency?
Of course.
So it says that the euro is a single currency for the European Union. Nevertheless, I see it differently. Because as I have learned, there is not one single currency for the EU, but its different currencies. Because each EU country mints its own euro coins and prints its own euro banknotes. I do not think that this is the same as a single currency. Because a single currency would really have to be uniform, in the sense that there is only one form of euro, and not separate coins and notes from each EU country.
That is right, because uniformity means that there must be uniformity in every respect, so that not every EU state can produce its own coins and notes, even if there is a uniform value description. A real single currency should only be determined by the European Union, but never differentiated by individual states.
Did your ancestors know this problem too?
That was the case, yes. But it was very quickly recognized that really only a global single currency was the right thing to do. In fact, our ancestors also knew the problem of money, but they solved it by a real and global single currency before all means of money were abolished. When the correctness of moneylessness was recognized and everything was transformed according to its benefit.
Then another question. Are swinging waves of fear from animals, fish, and birds, etc. transferable to humans?
With absolute certainty.
Is this also the case when people eat meat from animals, fish, and birds, etc., that have been subjected to fear before or during killing?
That too is of absolute certainty.
Although I have asked before, I think it was with Quetzal. What is the nature of the intelligence test that is done on Earth by so-called professionals, like psychologists and so on? What do you think about it? Are these tests valuable and scientifically highly rated?
They are pseudoscientific machinations which must be called nonsense and have no relevance to true intelligence. The so-called intelligence quotient, the IQ, as it is called by terrestrial human beings, can in no wise be associated with the true intelligence of a human being, but in any case can only be related to a good general or specialist knowledge, that is to say, in relation to a small or special field of knowledge and the like. But this need not be evidence of intelligence in any wise, for the aforementioned abilities can also be shown by geniuses without them having a high, great, or extraordinary intelligence.
By genius, I assume you also mean what we call nerds, etc., no?
That is the meaning of my words. But now, dear friend Edward, I must say goodbye. See you at the proofreading, then.
Farewell. See you tonight.
Basic rules of the Figu.
1. Every human being must ask for his or her own meaning of life, seek and find it, and want to use it to improve their life and work. 2. Every human being must be themselves and therefore also his or her own leader, who develops their own resounding ideas, pursues and realizes them. 3. Every human being must use his or her own rationality and intellect in such a wise that he or she demands the best and the most wholesome from themselves, forms themselves according to their own will, and obeys their own needs in their own free wise. 4. Every human being must form themselves in such a wise that they are always themselves, has his or her own intense experiences, never allows themselves to be enslaved or otherwise subjugated, and consequently maintains their personal inner and outer freedom in every respect, both in their thoughts and feelings and in their decisions, views, opinions, emotions and actions, etc. 5. Every human being must show the kindness and love necessary for himself or herself, and feel secure in themselves and be honest with themselves in such a wise that he or she is able to understand his or her own thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions, and etc. 6. Every human being must align his or her thoughts, ideas, wishes, needs and actions, etc. in such a wise that he or she feels capable of high goals, which, however, always correspond to the nature of their abilities and possibilities, and therefore should not be overstretched and not be raised too high. 7. Every human being should see and know themselves as they really are, so that they do not imagine themselves as an ideal world, because this is not possible for any human being due to the fact that everyone has to learn, and is therefore subject to mistakes and imperfections. So it is not possible for everything to be clear in the human being, for everything to be right, and for him or her to be better than the fellow human beings. 8. Every human being must always be fully aware that there are consciousness-based differences from one person to another, and consequently, not everyone can be as intelligent as the other. This does not, however, justify seeing one's fellow human beings as deluded and classifying them at a low level as human beings. Nor is it justified if one's fellow men are religiously or even sectarian prejudiced, for in spite of this, they too are human beings who, like all others, are subject to the natural and creational law-based matters of life and evolutionary learning. 9. Every human being should strive by his or her own efforts to shape and fulfill their existence and existential duties in every form of righteousness, honesty, rationality, and intentionality, etc., and indeed both in the material as well as in the consciousness-based, character-based, virtue-based, thought-feeling-based, as well as psychical areas. As a result, the human being should also create a pronounced motivation to ascend within themselves, and to do so without humiliating themselves in any manner, not even in religious or sectarian form. 10. Every human being should not use his or her idealism for unworthy as well as unprovable and questionable things, but should direct their idealism specifically towards recognizing themselves in their true nature and bettering, completing and also realizing it externally, because the true nature is the very nature of that which is directed towards progress and success, and is consequently the origin of the shaping of the life. 11. Every human being should not believe in just anything, but should always seek the fundamental truth, which he or she can find only in themselves if they search and rethink everything, when they let their rationality, their intellect, and their healthy logic prevail. Thus, the human being can find the truth only in themselves, but that too only when they are free from any belief in things that they can never prove in themselves. Belief is not evidence, but only something that is accepted as beloved, desirable and right, without verifiable content being able to be cited for it. Therefore, a faith can never be conclusive, because exactly the fact of provable veracity is missing. 12. Every human being can never find that of real truth that he or she has been searching for years or a whole life, if they simply surrender to a belief and do not explore and recognize the factuality of truth through logic, reason, and rationality in themselves, in order to then also implement and follow it through his or her life and lifestyle. 13. Every human being should see his or her highest goal in shaping and implementing their knowledge, their ability, their true love, their real happiness, their abilities and possibilities, as well as their wisdom and humanity in such a progressive wise that they can thereby lead a truly evolutive and humane life, and also assist their fellow humans in this wise. 14. Every human being pays attention first of all to himself or herself, thus to their personality, their character, their virtues, thoughts, feelings, and actions, so that he or she directs everything in such a wise that everything is right, and that misleading aims are not pursued that end in faith in unreal things. 15. Every human being administers his or her income and property in a reasonable manner and does not waste it on unreality of belief-based things, for everyone should be of the right and take care of themselves when they are given the opportunity and the existence to do so that they do not become an unjust burden on their fellow human beings and do not behave as a parasite. 16. Every human being lives in the present but looks to the future and cares for its shaping, while also considering and learning from the past in order to achieve success, knowledge, and progress. 17. Every human being needs rest and peace. Therefore, he or she needs their quiet hours and should not be constantly occupied, either in their solitude or in the company of their fellow humans, in the family or in communities. Every person needs the leisure time, for only through this can they gather and rest themselves. But it should always be appropriate and not excessive, so that it does not become a burden and not an annoyance of one's own thoughts and feelings, and also not an annoyance of one's fellow humans. 18. Every human being always takes care that they always seek only the truth and never a doctrine of salvation, because in truth there is no such thing, not in a philosophical, religious, secular, sectarian, or other ideological direction, nor in a scientific one. In any case, a doctrine of salvation always corresponds to a religious fraud, or at least to charlatanry or criminal profiteering. Truly, what counts is always reality, the actuality that is based on the use of the healthy common sense and the rationality and on actual logic. 19. Every human being should always be open and honest with his or her fellow human beings, and never presume, for whatever reason, to control their fellow humans in such a wise that they suffer harm. This is so in the family as well as in every community, so that neither hypocrisy nor discrimination or other injustice may occur. 20. Every human being is attentive to his or her inner and outer freedom, and never bind themselves to anything from which they are no longer able to free themselves, or which frightens them from taking the step of liberation, whether this now is related to purely material things and values, or to a human relationship, with regard to a family, or with regard to a community of any kind. 21. Every human being should be careful never to accept and understand any political, philosophical, sectarian, secular, scientific, religious, or other ideological teaching as true truth or as real, true knowledge, etc., because truly, every teaching should be questioned in every detail, because only by doing so can the effective truth be fathomed and reality be experienced. 22. Every human being must always be aware that his or her lived life, no matter how many years it may be, has never been purposeless and senseless. Consequently, the life lived has lost nothing in itself, because every second lived has certainly fulfilled its intentionality and brought evolutionary success, even if the result may have been only small. 23. Every human being should always have a clear and rational sense and not expose themselves to constant influence by any teachings, which would deprive them of the opportunity of his or her own reflecting, brooding, fathoming, recognizing, and understanding. If the human being wants to deal with any things or with a teaching, they must always be mindful of the possibility of spending enough time to let their thoughts and feelings, their considerations and ideas, etc., play out, so that they can fathom everything and find the conclusions and the truth within themselves. 24. Everyone must be careful to cultivate interpersonal relationships, to devote themselves to family ties, friendships, comradeships, and acquaintances. Parents, brothers and sisters, friends, acquaintances, and the fellow human beings in general must always be a fountain of joy and peace, in a form of freedom that connects and expands in every wise. 25. Each person must always be concerned that life should give them a meaning and give them a feeling of security and protection. This must be expressed both in the company of fellow human beings and in one's own solitude. 26. Every human being must make his or her life so eventful that they find love, happiness, joy, peace, harmony, balance, and freedom in it. 27. Every person who wants to live according to reality must have and maintain a healthy self-esteem and self-confidence, because only through this can healthy, self-sustaining and progressive thoughts, feelings, and actions be expressed in relation to oneself. 28. Every human being should always and at all times behave in such a decent and virtuous manner, as well as with regard to his or her work and opinions, knowledge and education, that they are perceived and respected as a real human being, both in their immediate and wider surroundings. 29. Every human being lives his or her life in such a wise that after their passing away, there are still good memories of them, which let them live on posthumously in good thoughts. 30. Every human being lives in such a wise that his or her fellow human beings take part in their life and honor them in their thoughts and feelings. There may well be enemies who partake in evil modes of being, but they are forgiven, for not hatred, but peace and forgiveness should be the work of love. 31. Every person should feel embedded in the good community of fellow human beings, so that a communal experience of life may promote love, peace, and freedom, as well as harmony and individual happiness. 32. Every person is assiduous to such an extent that both intellectual and emotional, as well as spontaneous and sentimental loving, can develop in his or her life. Thus it is given that every human being finds new, good, joyful, and positive directions in life again and again, both spontaneously and well thought out in many respects. 33. Every human being strives throughout his or her life to fulfill this in every respect, such as learning and gathering knowledge, in the acquiring of wisdom, in the practicing of satisfying work, in the true love and harmony, as well as in being mindful of preserving peace and freedom. 34. Every human being should always be open to all things, so that he or she can always find both much mystery and excitement in their life, which may surprise and amaze them, which may take their breath away from joyful fright and make them always young. 35. Every human being should always maintain an open, good, loving, peaceful, harmonious, and free relationship with all humans, even if they are hostile to them. As a rule, hatred does not harm one's neighbor, but the hater themselves, because the satisfaction of one's own hatred becomes one's own shame. 36. Every human being must always be open to questions about the meaning of life and human existence, and these questions must be a need for them to reflect, and also to talk about them with his or her fellow human beings, in order to gain the knowledge of the truth from them. 37. Every person must have the feeling and the certainty that what is important to him or her can also be communicated and explained to their fellow human beings, and that they will be shown understanding for it. 38. Every person must have the feeling and the certainty that what oppresses and burdens him or her is understood by their fellow human beings, and that they can expect useful advice or other help in return. 39. Every person should lead his or her life so openly that it is of benefit and useful in every positive form for themselves, as well as for their family, for their relationships, and for the community. 40. Every human being should be careful not to simply avoid problems and conflicts, but to seek solutions to them and to overcome them. 41. Every human being has the obligation to build up sufficient self-confidence and a healthy self-esteem to be able to face and master all tasks and difficulties that appear in life. 42. Every human being should always strive not to be upset by any tensions that appear in themselves or in others, not to feel uncomfortable, and not to become insecure. 43. Every human being should strive to shape all situations in life in a self-confident and thoughtful wise, if this opportunity is given to them. 44. Every human being should form themselves in such a wise that even through unclear, confused, and unpleasant situations, he or she does not fall into thoughts and feelings that are reflected in him or her. 45. Every human being must always be equipped to encounter thoughts and feelings of aversion in a relaxed manner, to deal with them correctly, and not be at their mercy. 46. Every person should make an effort to communicate with his or her fellow human beings in order to express their own attitude and represent their own opinion or learning interests. 47. Every person should set goals in his or her life which they strive for and achieve with care, attention, interest, motivation, and self-confidence. 48. Every person must find his or her life worth living in every situation. 49. Every human being must always determine his or her behavior by themselves, but not through external circumstances, by fellow human beings or by religions, sects, philosophies, sciences, or any ideologies.
Regensdorf, ZH, Saturday, 3rd February 1951. 20:02 hours, Edouard, 14 years old.